The war did not begin with fire, it began with silence. Across the silver skies of the Zellerian Empire, communication arrays went dark one by one. Alien Queen Valith stood alone on the balcony of her orbital palace, watching distant stars flicker as fleets vanished into battle. She was known across galaxies as the Iron Queen, ruler of 1,000 systems, feared and respected. Yet on that day, her hands trembled not from fear of war, but from fear for her daughter. Princess Lyra had insisted on joining the front lines, not as royalty, but as a commander. Valith had argued, threatened, even ordered her to stay. Lyra only smiled and said the Empire must see its future fighting beside them. When the final transmission came, it was broken, full of static and screams. A human mercenary unit reported the ambush, the battlefield consumed by plasma storms, survivors retreating. No body was recovered. No escape signal was detected. The council declared Princess Lyra lost, presumed dead. The Queen did not cry before her people. She ordered the war to continue, harder, colder, without mercy. But alone, in the dark halls of her palace, Valith whispered her daughter's name to the stars. Years passed, and the war became legend. Entire species were erased, alliances shattered, and hope faded. Among the drifting wreckage of forgotten battlefields moved a single human strike team, ghosts to most scanners. They were led by Captain Elias Ward, a human warrior known for surviving missions labeled impossible. Elias was not fighting for glory or empire. He fought because he had seen what war did to worlds left undefended. On a classified deep space recovery mission, his team detected a faint energy signature inside a collapsed alien carrier. Life readings were weak, barely there, but human protocol demanded investigation. Inside the frozen hull, Elias found something unexpected. An alien warrior, preserved in a damaged stasis field, armor marked with royal sigils. Her vitals were unstable, but alive. Against orders, Elias ordered an emergency extraction. He did not know her name, her importance, or the war she came from. He only knew leaving her would mean deaths. Princess Lyra awoke in a human medical bay, lights harsh and unfamiliar. Her body ached, her memories fragmented. When she tried to rise, a human hand gently pressed her back down. Elias introduced himself calmly, weapon holstered, voice steady. At first, Lyra believed she had been captured. But days passed without chains or threats. The humans treated her wounds, repaired her armor, and spoke to her as an equal. Elias explained they had pulled her from a collapsed battlefield years after the ambush. The stasis failure had slowed her aging, trapping her between moments of life and death. When Lyra spoke of her mother, Elias understood the weight of her survival. The galaxy believed her dead. Her return could change everything. But the path back to the Zellerian Empire was blocked by enemy fleets and political assassins who benefited from her absence. Elias made a choice that would define history. He offered to lead her home, no payment, no recognition. Just a promise that no one left behind deserved to stay lost. Queen Valith felt it before the message arrived. A shift in the stars, a tremor in her instincts. When the encrypted signal broke through Imperial defenses, the throne room fell silent. The message showed Lyra alive, standing beside a human warrior, scarred but unbroken. The Queen collapsed to her knees, not as a ruler, but as a mother. Years of grief shattered in a single breath. But hope was dangerous. Enemies within the Empire moved quickly. Fleets were dispatched to intercept the human ship, not to rescue, but to erase the truth. Valith secretly mobilized loyal forces, trusting no one beyond her inner guard. As battles erupted across hyperspace lanes, Elias led his team through impossible maneuvers. Human adaptability clashed against alien precision. Lyra fought beside them, reclaiming her strength, her command, and her purpose. For the first time, she saw humanity not as outsiders, but as warriors who fought for those they barely knew. The final confrontation occurred at the edge of the Zellarian homeworld. Enemy fleets surrounded the human vessel, weapons primed. Before the first shot fired, Queen Valith's personal armada emerged from hyperspace. The sky burned with light as loyalists crushed the traitors in moments. Lyra's ship descended to the capital amid stunned silence. When the Queen saw her daughter step onto the platform, alive and proud, she forgot every rule of royalty. She embraced Lyra before the entire empire. Cheers echoed across cities, across worlds, across species. Elias stood apart, preparing to leave quietly. But Queen Valith stopped him. She declared before the council that a human warrior had done what an empire could not. She named Elias Ward Defender of the Crown and brother of the Zellarian line. An honor never before granted to an outsider. As peace negotiations began, a new era formed. One where humans were no longer seen as mercenaries, but as allies. And in the stories whispered across the galaxy, one truth endured. A queen lost her daughter to war, but found her again, led home by a human who refused to leave hope behind. Peace did not arrive with celebration, it arrived with tension. The galaxy had learned how to fight together, but not yet how to forgive. While banners were raised and treaties signed, shadows still moved between the stars. Queen Valith understood this better than anyone. War had taken her daughter once, and she would not allow peace to take her again. Princess Lyra stood beside her mother in the high chamber, watching delegates from dozens of species argue over borders and blame. Each voice claimed loss, each demanded justice. But Lyra heard something else beneath their words, fear. Fear that the old order was gone. Fear that humanity's rise had shifted the balance forever. Elias Ward remained on Zellaria as an official envoy, though he trusted politics less than battlefields. Humans were adaptable, but alien courts were a different kind of war zone. Every gesture was measured, every silence dangerous. Still, Elias stayed, because Lyra asked him to. And because some missions did not end when the shooting stopped. The first sign of trouble came quietly. A mining colony on the fringe went dark, no distress call, no survivors. Then another vanished, and another. These were not military targets, but shared settlements where former enemies lived side by side. The message was clear: someone wanted the galaxy afraid again. Scouts recovered fragments of unfamiliar technology, older than the current war, but upgraded with terrifying efficiency. Valith recognized the design instantly. The Ashen Continuum, an ancient coalition believed destroyed centuries ago. A civilization that thrived on endless war, harvesting survivors to fuel their machines. They had waited, hidden beyond mapped space, watching the galaxy weaken itself. The Queen called an emergency conclave. Panic spread faster than reason. Some demanded immediate retaliation, others isolation. Several worlds threatened to withdraw from the new alliance entirely. Lyra listened, silent, her fists clenched beneath the table. She remembered drifting alone in stasis, years passing like a single breath. She remembered waking among humans who owed her nothing. And she realized something the others did not. The Ashen Continuum had not returned by accident. They had returned because unity had finally become possible, and unity was their greatest enemy. Lyra stood and spoke, her voice calm but unyielding. She told them fear was the weapon being used against them. That division would finish what war had failed to do. And that the enemy they faced now was older, crueler, and far more patient than any before. For the first time, the chamber fell completely silent. Elias was tasked with leading a joint strike force, human, Zellarian, and allied species together. It was unprecedented and dangerously fragile. Trust had to be built in days instead of generations. Training exercises turned into arguments, arguments into near firefights. But slowly, something changed. Human soldiers adapted to alien tactics. Alien commanders learned the value of human unpredictability. Lyra commanded alongside Elias, her presence a living symbol of survival. To many, she was no longer just a princess, but proof that the galaxy could endure even its worst losses. The mission was simple in theory: locate the Ashen Continuum's forward command and destroy it. In reality, it was a descent into nightmare space. Stars dimmed unnaturally, sensors malfunctioned, time itself seemed unstable. Ships vanished from scanners only to reappear seconds later, twisted and damaged. Fear crept into even the bravest minds. When the enemy finally revealed themselves, they did so without warning. Massive structures emerged from the void, neither ship nor station, but something alive and mechanical at once. They spoke across open channels, not in threats, but in promises. Promises of order, of endless conflict to give meaning to existence. Many younger species faltered, unsure how to fight something that believed war was mercy. The first engagement was catastrophic. Allied ships were torn apart by weapons that rewrote energy signatures mid-impact. Command structures failed, chaos spread. Elias took control when protocols collapsed, issuing rapid, instinctive orders. Humans charged into gaps, others hesitated to approach. Lyra led a boarding assault against one of the living structures. Inside, corridors pulsed like veins, walls whispering with stolen memories. She saw visions of fallen soldiers from every species, their experiences harvested and reused. Rage steadied her hands instead of overwhelming her. This enemy would never be allowed to claim another generation. The core was protected by an intelligence older than recorded history. It recognized Lyra instantly, not as a threat, but as a resource. It offered her power, immortality, an end to loss. She answered with her blade. Because survival without choice was just another form of death. The explosion tore through the structure, lighting the void like a newborn star. But victory came at a cost. Several ships were disabled, including Elias, drifting toward enemy territory. Evacuation was impossible, rescue unlikely. For the first time since her return, Lyra felt fear not for herself, but for the human who had brought her home. Queen Valith watched the battle unfold from the capital, surrounded by advisors urging retreat. She ignored them all. A mother's instinct outweighed every strategic model. She committed the full Imperial Reserve, breaking ancient laws, risking everything. If the galaxy burned, it would burn trying to protect its future. The combined assault turned the tide. Ashen structures collapsed one by one, their ancient intelligence overwhelmed by cooperation it could not predict. The enemy had prepared for resistance, but not for loyalty across species. Not for sacrifice without conquest. Not for humans charging into certain death, simply so others could escape. Elia's ship was recovered barely intact. When Lyra reached him, wounded but alive, she allowed herself a moment of weakness. She gripped his armor and laughed, a sound halfway between relief and disbelief. Elias joked that surviving impossible odds was becoming a habit. But his eyes revealed how close they had come to never returning. The war after the war ended not with annihilation, but with understanding. The Ashen Continuum was not completely destroyed, but broken, scattered beyond the edges of known space. The galaxy chose vigilance over vengeance, unity over dominance. It was an imperfect peace, but a real one. In the years that followed, alliances hardened into something stronger. Shared academies, trained mixed-species units. Borders became meeting points instead of walls. Humanity earned its place not through conquest, but through consistency, always showing up when hope was fading. Princess Lyra declined the crown when Valith offered it. Not out of rejection, but readiness. She chose to lead beyond a throne, traveling worlds, representing survival and cooperation. Queen Valith ruled with renewed purpose, no longer hardened by grief, but sharpened by wisdom. As for Elia's ward, history struggled to define him. Soldier, diplomat, legend. He rejected titles when he could, accepted responsibility when he could not. And when asked why he had saved a lone alien warrior all those years ago, he answered simply that no one deserved to be forgotten in the dark. Across the galaxy, stories spread. Not just of battles and queens, but of choices. Of a mother who never stopped believing. Of a daughter who returned stronger than loss. And of a human who reminded the stars what hope looked like. Time moved differently after the Great Conflict. The galaxy no longer counted years by wars, but by rebuilding. Princess Lyra traveled constantly, her presence a bridge between species that once aimed weapons at each other. On human worlds, she was welcomed as a hero. On alien capitals, she was seen as a living promise that the future did not belong to any single race. Yet inside her, something had changed forever. She had died once, at least in the way the galaxy remembered her. The years trapped in stasis had stolen pieces of her past. In their place grew something new, shaped by human resilience and alien legacy combined. She was no longer just the Queen's daughter. Elia's ward accompanied her on many of these missions, officially as security, unofficially as grounding. Where Lyra carried the weight of symbols and expectations, Elia's carried simplicity. He treated her the same whether she stood before a council or sat alone, watching unfamiliar stars. That constancy mattered more than either of them admitted. Because legends were lonely things. On the edge of known space, they answered a call from a newly contacted species. A small civilization fearful of first contact, having watched the wars from hiding. They expected conquerors, or gods, or monsters. Instead, they received a princess who spoke gently of loss, and a human who listened more than he spoke. The meeting was tense but peaceful. Lyra shared the truth of the galaxy, not just its victories but its scars. She told them survival did not require domination, only cooperation. When the young species agreed to join the alliance, it was not out of fear but choice. Another quiet victory that would never make war records. Meanwhile, Queen Valith ruled from Zelaria with a steadiness unseen in her earlier reign. The fire that once fueled conquest now forged protection. She strengthened defenses not to intimidate, but to deter. Her greatest pride was not her fleets, but watching her daughter shape the future beyond imperial walls. A future Valith once feared Lyra would never see. Not all accepted this new era. Fragments of old warlords and extremists whispered that unity weakened strength. They spread rumors that Lyra was no longer truly Zelarian. That humanity had changed her, diluted her loyalty. Danger returned in subtler forms. The attack came during a diplomatic summit on a neutral station. Explosions tore through outer rings, artificial gravity failing, panic spreading. Assassins moved through smoke and fire, targeting Lyra specifically. Elias reacted without hesitation, pulling her into cover as weapons discharged. Training replaced fear. Lyra fought back not as a sheltered royal, but as a veteran commander. Side by side with humans and aliens alike, she held the line. When the attackers were finally subdued, their message was clear. They feared what she represented more than any fleet. A future where old hatred no longer had power. The aftermath shook Lyra more than the battle itself. She realized she would always be a target, not for who she was, but for what she symbolized. That realization no longer frightened her. Instead, it clarified her purpose. Some paths were dangerous because they mattered. In the quiet that followed, Lyra stood alone in the station's observation ring. Stars drifted slowly beyond the glass, indifferent and eternal. Elias joined her without speaking. After a long silence, Lyra asked if he ever regretted saving her. If life would have been simpler had he followed orders and left her behind. Elias answered honestly. He said simpler did not mean better. That the universe was shaped by people who chose to care when it was inconvenient. And that if given the choice again, he would do the same without hesitation. Lyra smiled, a small but genuine expression of peace. When they returned to Zelaria, Queen Valith sensed the shift in her daughter immediately. Lyra no longer stood between worlds, she stood above the line dividing them. Not ruling, not commanding, but guiding. Valith understood then that Lyra's destiny was larger than any throne. And she accepted it without sorrow. A new title was spoken quietly at first, then echoed across systems. The daughter of two worlds. Not a symbol of division, but convergence. Where humanity and alien kind met not in war, but understanding. Lyra embraced the name, knowing titles only mattered if backed by action. As the years unfolded, the galaxy stabilized. Conflicts still arose, but they were answered together. Children of different species trained side by side, learning histories once taught only as enemies. Stories of the old war faded into lessons rather than warnings. Hope became habit instead of exception. And sometimes, far from councils and battlefields, Lyra and Elias would sit on a quiet world beneath unfamiliar skies. Not as princess and warrior, but as survivors who had found meaning in chaos. They would watch the stars and remember how close everything had come to being lost, and how one choice had changed the fate of countless lives. The galaxy would remember Queen Valith as a ruler who endured grief and emerged wiser. It would remember Lyra as a leader who returned from death to unite worlds. And it would remember a human who stepped into alien darkness and refused to walk away. Because history was not written only by empires, but by those who chose hope when silence seemed easier.